All right, what is going on, everyone, and welcome back to Mets Weekly. We are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X for pre-game coverage of the Mets versus Brewers Game 2 of the National League Wild Card Series. Lots of excitement going into this one. Obviously, the Mets about to make their move, and hopefully they can punch their ticket to Philly in this Game 2. Easy breezy just like that, but we'll see what happens. But before we get into all the specifics, I just want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel for live recordings of the Mets Weekly podcast following every single Mets postseason game during the postseason. For those of you watching live or on playback, you want to join the conversation, make sure to turn on your post notifications to know when we go live. And after tonight's game, we will be going live for episode number 89 of the Mets Weekly podcast, which will be the episode that goes out on audio. For those of you in the live chat right now, we want to let you know we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns, all of your thoughts on this team. If you feel like you're being ignored, you're not being ignored whatsoever. You're just being starred throughout the show, so we can pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Also, remember to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok for future content over there, where we just wrapped up Frank's postseason thoughts for every Mets regular season game, titled The Mets Frankly Postgame. For our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on all your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes of our podcast, which will be our postgame tonight, of course, at 9 a.m. the following day. Without further ado, let's get into the pre-game coverage of Mets postseason. The Mets are coming off of a fun win. Not much stress. Let's say stress, sweat bullets throughout it. I'd say like the first four or five innings, but other than that, the Mets put the hammer down in the fifth inning. For those of you who don't remember, a big 5-run fifth inning. The offense came in with tons of timely hitting, 5 for 7 with runners in scoring position. Severino did his job, wasn't amazing, but was able to hold true through 6 innings, and also with a bullpen that was not well rested at all with the current situation that went on with Atlanta, the doubleheader, the hurricane. They were in a tough spot, but they were able to persevere and find a way to win game 1. Now we get to game 2. And we have Sean Manaea on the mound against Frankie Montas. We'll get into all the specifics, but my co-host here, Frank, has been impatiently waiting for about 3 minutes since this live stream just started. I am talking way too much. I apologize. I'll swing it over to you. I think I can just ask this easily. You're an old man. You like your sleep. Did you sleep well last night? I mean, they got quite a commanding win. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I mean, it was very exciting. I mean, a lot of emotions going through that first game. Just stress, frustration, happiness, and then just like you said, they kind of got into the groove and everything was all good. So that definitely helps you feel a lot better. And you're able to sleep knowing that, okay, well, we have 2 chances to win 1 game and we move on, compared to on the flip side where you would have had if you lost 1 more, you're out. So, I definitely feel that obviously being up 1-0 makes things much easier. You're going in there with Sean Manaea, who by all accounts, like we've talked about, has been our ace this season. And you're going in now with a more rested bullpen. The pressure is on Milwaukee. I mean, overall, this is a team that won 93 games. We talked about yesterday a little bit. They've had some postseason struggles recently, even though they are consistently there. As far as what they do once they get there, that always remains to be seen. And some of it is like eventually talent kind of prevails. And we know that while they have a good ball club of a lot of athletic players, sometimes that low payroll, the $200 million difference in payroll from these teams, it sometimes shows up where you don't necessarily have the most talent, you're not able to just kind of overwhelm teams. So we'll see kind of what Milwaukee has in store. I definitely feel that they're going to be more aggressive tonight. I think we're going to see bunts. We're going to see definitely stolen base attempts today. I feel like they got to kind of play a much more sense of urgency to kind of get Manaea on the ropes because it's going to be tough to string hits together against him. But on the flip side, for Manaea, I want to see him be aggressive today. I feel that that's where he made the big leap. I know he talked about changing the delivery and pitching more like Chris Sale as far as his arm slot warming up differently than he normally did. But the big change for Manaea happened when he wasn't walking batters and being in constant 3-ball counts, driving up the pitch count, only able to work 4 innings, 5 innings. Once he became more aggressive and trusting that good stuff he has, he's a lot more effective. And with a lot of these guys in this Brewers lineup, there are, like I said, there are good players, but for the most part, they're not the greatest players. A lot of these guys below league average offensive production as far as swinging the bat. Once they get on the bases, they do wonderful offense with their speed. But as far as just getting on base, you don't want to give them free passes because, like we talked about, a walk is basically a double, or in some cases a triple, or it could be a run if they keep playing the small ball that Milwaukee is really good at, and they're not going to chase. So you have to keep that in mind. So I do want to see a different approach from Manaea tonight than we saw on Friday night.
Hopefully, and we are going to get into a lot of that stuff regarding Manaea because there is a little bit of a feel to change the narrative with Sean Manaea because not only did he have a really rough start in Milwaukee the last time through the rotation, I'm pretty sure, in the regular season, he also has not boded well in the postseason. He has 3 different starts in the postseason, and I think he has given up 13 earned runs in those like 7 innings he was taken out early. Obviously, that was quite a bit ago when he was in Oakland. I don't know if he made an appearance in San Francisco, but it has been quite a while since he's pitched in the postseason. Of course, history doesn't always repeat itself. It doesn't mean that he's an awful postseason pitcher. He's also a different pitcher from when he was back then. So maybe those adjustments help him succeed in these big moments, such as the postseason. And we will see if he will be able to prevail for us. Now, I think that one of the main things I want to get into, of course, just the overall atmosphere that they're going into Milwaukee. They took that crowd out of the game completely midway through. And I feel like if they can harvest in that game 1 adrenaline as to where, yes, you're getting into the pivotal game 2, where this could definitely decide what direction this goes in. The Mets are definitely a lot less tense, as we said. And hopefully going into this, they, don't display the streakiness that we have talked about before. We have seen them hit in one game and then not hit in the other, show up back to back. Let's see if they can actually repeat this. One thing I will say regarding the offense, and I will go to you on this one. There was definitely a lot of 2-out hitting, which was great. Good situational awareness. We did have the big hit from Winker that tripled down the line. And then there was just a blow up in the middle of the game, and the Mets took advantage of it, which is great. But you had quite a few ground ball hits for the Mets, and you can't really expect every single time for those to punch through. So, as for a guy like Frankie Montas, who I will get into in a second, the overall offensive approach, I don't want to swing this over to you. Do you think it should continue to be the same? Or do they need to realize that, like, okay, sometimes the ball's not going to roll your way, and they're going to have to stick to doing some damage in the zone, especially against a guy like Frankie Montas, who we'll get into, gives up a lot of damage in the zone and misses a lot of spots. I mean, the approach here, I'd say I would probably change it a little bit to try and stack things around and still make adjustments no matter if it worked or not. But again, it did work last night, and they were able to be victorious in that 5th inning, pretty much carrying it over. So what do you think? What are you seeing from this offense that you would probably see in a different light today in game 2?
Yeah, no, I like you said, I definitely think trying to be a little smarter with what they're doing. Frankie Montas is a guy who will walk more batters than Freddie Peralta does. Not by a lot, but he doesn't have quite that same command that Peralta does as far as how aggressive Freddie Peralta is in the zone. So that's something you definitely have to consider. But I think overall, knowing how much range Milwaukee has, there's going to be plays where Terang is diving and Ortiz is diving and making plays. You know, Churio is going to make wonderful plays out there, and Frelick is going to bang into the wall. So, you know, there are going to be those instances where that happens, where, you know, you hit the ball hard, but they still make a play on it. I think overall, though, it's kind of like we talked about for the power guys to display that power. So mainly Pete Alonso. I mean, yesterday he went 0 for 3 with the walks, but you know, if he was going to hit a home run, he hasn't hit one since September 9th, as mentioned in our live stream last night, would definitely be a great time to hit it. Starling Marte, he almost had one. Jackson Chura robbed it, but listen, he doesn't have a home run in the second half. That'd be a good time to do it. JD Martinez, been a while since he went yard. We'll take it. You know, obviously Lindor's got the power stroke at any time. Vientos hit a home run against Montas on Friday. So I think that if you hit the ball over the wall, they're not going to make a play on that. And like we said, those are just, that XBA is much higher. And just knowing that that's definitely a more reliable than just kind of always hoping on the ground. But to the same extent, though, you don't want to totally change everybody's approach. Like Iglesias has to stick with what he's doing. Like if Iglesias wants to go the other way and be the contact hitter that he is, sure. I mean, just do what you do best, get on base, and then let the other guys who are the power hitters bring you home. So they don't need to do anything too drastic here. I feel like just not letting Montas, just not beating themselves, I feel like is really the key here, because like I said, there is a lot of pressure here on Milwaukee. So I don't want to see that ugly chasing. I want to see them kind of, when Montas makes that mistake, don't miss it. So they really got to kind of keep an eye on their hitter counts and know that that's the time to attack.
That's something that Frankie Montas has also struggled with this year, getting consistent chases, especially with the secondary stuff. And that's one of the main reasons as to why there is a blinking stat that I do want to bring up in a second here. But I do want to give a full rundown of Frankie Montas, because obviously this matchup has happened before. It happened about a week ago. But I do want to get a little bit more in depth of what happened. Now, this did not turn into a good game for the Mets. I'm pretty sure they lost that one 8-4. That was the opener of the series. A lot went on in that game, which we will get into as well. But the full-on arsenal of Frankie Montas, he is a 5-pitch right-handed pitcher. Four-seam that he throws 33% of the time, a sinker and a cutter that he both throws 19% of the time, a splitter at 18%, and a slider at 11%, which is pretty much in the same hybrid realm as his cutter, which most are from most of these guys who have a sinker. His best pitch is definitely his sinker. That sits at about 94 to 95, tops 97. Glove side run with over 13 inches. And he also has that late zone tail to right-handed hitters, which is definitely something you have to look out for against a Mets lineup that has a lot of right-handed hitters in it. And then the overall grades. 102 stuff plus, a 104 command plus, and a 100 pitching plus. The rest of his arsenal, he has a fastball that can sit 95 to 96, tops 99, over 15 inches of induced vertical break. He has a hybrid high spin, low 90s cutter, which like we can also put as a slider, but different spin differentials, where he has a 2,500 RPM arm side cutting slider, and of course a heavy fading splitter, which you also probably could say is a changeup in some ways, but he still does get more of the zone with that splitter as compared to what a changeup does. So it's a little bit different. As for other notes this season, left-handed hitters are absolutely destroying Montas's cutter. They have an xwOBA, or quality of contact, of 412 against it. Hitters have also posted a 43.1% hard hit rate versus Montas in general on batted balls. That is 6th worst among starting pitchers in 2024. All 5 of his pitches have registered hard hit rates over 35% this season. He has streaky overall control and command, like we said, walking 10.1% of batters this season. And just overall, 2 other pieces that I do want to add to the keys to the game. But other than that, we know that Frankie Montas at times can be an electric pitcher and get a lot of swings and misses. and dial up the velocity, there's probably going to be a moment where he does dial it up and he's not sitting at 95, 96. Maybe he gives you 98. Maybe he gives you 97. Like, this guy can throw hard. He's been hurt a lot recently. And of course, he came over to the Brewers mid-season from the Reds, was traded there. And pretty much he's been like pretty much the same pitcher in terms of production. But I think that this is definitely a pivotal point where, you definitely can get to Montas pretty easily. I've seen him many, many times when he was in Oakland. We all know how I have that Oakland connection to my dad as well. Loses his head a lot. He definitely does. And if they can somewhat rattle him in that postseason atmosphere, they're going to be in good shape, and we'll see what happens. But of course, with Frankie Montas, with this pitching matchup, Frank, I'll go over to you and cue you in here with the fact that this matchup did happen once again. This happened about a week ago. It did not go in the Mets' favor, but obviously there were some other elements that happened in that game that hopefully don't happen again. But seeing this as a repeat from a week ago, what are your thoughts of kind of establishing a different narrative from a week ago in this same ballpark, same matchup, same teams, same pretty much everything to set it up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing was Montas walked 3 batters on Friday. So, yeah, like I said, just trying to keep that in mind of not chasing. And if he's going to put you on base, let him do it. And like you said, let him put even more pressure on himself to when he can lose head, get rattled. And that's when hopefully you can try doing those avalanche innings like the way they did in the fifth. But one of the other things I find pretty fascinating is that the Mets went extremely right-handed heavy, which they already are to begin with. But you have Lindor in there as the switch hitter, Nimmo as the lefty. Everyone else is right-handed. So I found it very interesting that Winker did not get a start. He did start on Friday against Montas. Didn't do well, but maybe the back thing was bothering him. I'm not sure. So, but the key though, as far as him, like you said, that cutter is really, since basically everyone here is almost right-handed, the key is the cutter. I mean, that's the pitch that they really have got to capitalize on. Far too often that release point ends up in the zone. And I think really for these right-handed hitters, we've talked so much about struggling with that outside slider. That's where he's going with his slider. I mean, everything else, the four-seamer, the cutter, the splitter, everything else is more on that inside part of the plate where guys like Alonso, Vientos, and these guys could really do their damage. So I feel like this approach for them, knowing that they struggle with the sliders, should be to try to lay off that because he's trying to get chasing from that and try to hope that he hangs some of those cutters, maybe hangs a splitter, and then kind of tee off. I mean, that's really the approach I want to see here is, like, that's the Mets' weakness offensively, are those sliders outside. So I feel like just trying to not let him expose that, and it's honestly his least used pitch anyway. So I feel like trying to take advantage of the sinker, the cutter, and the four seam that all could kind of hang out over that inner part of the plate for the righties would be ideal.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has lowered the arm slot a little bit since his heydays of like 2019. I mean, there's definitely a little bit more of the adjustments from there. And he's also had a lot of elbow issues. I'm pretty sure he had like the suspension from PEDs earlier in his career. But when it comes to somebody like Montas, there's definitely been some speculation, which is kind of weird to feel about that when it comes to, um, you know, Milwaukee with how good they have been with pitchers. But there has been, I would say that, we talked about Luis Severino tipping pitches. Montas has also been a candidate of people realizing him tipping pitches as well. Main reason as to why he was giving up so much hard contact with stuff that really could play in a postseason game, could play in a rotation, which is really has been the only thing keeping him in starters roles. Even though he continues to walk everyone, and even though he continues to extend the inning by himself and losing the strike zone, that's the one thing that is keeping him in the rotation. And right now, when you put in that kind of uncertainty into your rotation, facing elimination, they are definitely going to be desperate. That's something that the Mets really do need to take care of in terms of that. Now, there is one other piece of pitching that I do want to talk about, and that obviously being the Mets bullpen. Now, it is going to be a little bit more well rested. Let's just say that they've had some decent rest. I think over 24 hours of rest since that game one of the doubleheader in Atlanta. And right now, I do feel like you're not going to see Phil Maton, like, because I still think he needs another day. But you also do have an off day tomorrow if you do win. So if they could
two
go
off days if you win.
Two off days as well. So again, I think that they could put themselves in a position you're going to have some length from Manaea, of course, but if you don't get it, you still will have some arms available. Kranick, we have yet to see him make his debut. Probably will be mopped up. Danny Young, Reed Garrett did not pitch yesterday. Ryan Stanek did, but he was pretty efficient. He'll probably be back again. Diaz has said he is available today, so we'll see. Brazoban and Ottavino kind of, those cleanup pieces as well, kind of more in low leverage. I talked about my game plan with the Mets' shortened bullpen because there wasn't really many options that they had in this first game. But now you kind of have more situationally sound where you can kind of look at this from a close game to like 5+ run game where it's not close or close. I mean, the Manaea blow up, I would still do Kranick and Young kind of like that, mopping it up. Maybe you put Brazoban in there if you want to. Again, if they don't want to push Kranick that much because he is coming back from quite a few injuries over the last few years. Manaea, if he goes 5 innings pitched, if it's close, I would probably go to Brazoban in the 6th. Only just because I feel like that's just the best way to shorten the game, even though he has had his struggles, the middle of relief. I feel like that would probably be the best way to put it. And there's also just nobody else that I would trust in there. Ottavino, I'm not putting in there. I'm not putting Danny Young in there. So I would just go to Brazoban, with prayers in mind. Stanek, I would give him the 7th. Garrett, I give him the 8th. And then Diaz would get the 9th. If it's 5 innings from Manaea in a 5-run game, Kranick would get the next two innings, and then Brazoban would get the next 2 as well. So you're kind of just going on low leverage there. 6 innings, Garrett, Stanek, Diaz. If it's close, 5+ runs, Garrett in the 9th, Danny Young for the 7th and 8th. 7 innings, if it is close. From Manaea, if it is close, I am giving Edwin Diaz a 6-out save. Or I'm giving Edwin Diaz a 6-out outing, no matter what the situation is. If it's close, 5+ runs, I'd probably just let Kranick finish that out. And then 8 innings pitched, if it's close, Diaz would get the 9th because basically if the meat of the order is due up, definitely would go to Diaz. And then 5+ runs, probably just Danny Young, or you can throw in Kranick or whatever you want to do, depending on, what the score is, what the situation is, if there's anybody on base, because we did not see any mid-inning changes yesterday. So there's probably going to be more decisions to make today, most likely by probability. But when it comes to just managing the bullpen, you have a little bit more flexibility here. What do you think, Frank? Would you, switch anything up that I would possibly do? I think that there's tons of combinations you can do here with more flexibility, but Manaea, we'll see. I mean, we've seen him struggle to get out of, get deep into games. We know he had that big streak there, but last time in Milwaukee, he was not so lucky.
Yeah, and one of the other things that Carlos Mendoza mentioned is that they do have David Peterson available for tonight in a bullpen role.
Okay.
They try to kind of the way he had him work his way up. Mendoza's treating this like a big game, and as it is, but he's treating it almost like an elimination game from the other side, which I'm totally fine with. In a short series, if you have a chance to end it. Let's not play around. Let's not risk for tomorrow and Quintana blows up or something. So you know what? If he needs to bring Peterson into the ball game to make sure it gets the job done, so be it. Now the Brewers have also gone extremely right-handed heavy tonight, going up against the lefty and Sean Manaea. So again, the one opportunity you might use David Pearson is that 7-8-9. You got Frelick, the left-handed hitter, Ortiz right-handed, Terang left-handed. But overall, you also have to consider how good David Pearson pitched this past Sunday. Now, the
Yeah.
Brewers weren't really trying. They didn't have Contreras, they didn't have Adames, they didn't have Hoskins. But I think that maybe that's an opportunity for Peterson, maybe in like the fifth inning or sixth inning, like we talked about, instead of a Brazaban. I'd probably go like a David Peterson there if you're facing that lower half of the order. But I'm with you though. I feel like Stanek could definitely go again. Diaz, he's certainly available. If they need him to go more than the 4 outs, go for it. I kind of treat it that thing we talk about, like see how far Stanek could get you. And if he has it, but then if he gets to a little bit of trouble, then you go Diaz. So like, let's say maybe it's a 4 out save instead of a 6 out save or something like that. That would be more ideal. Just kind of see how far the other guys could get you before you have to totally extend Edwin Diaz, because even though he's available, I don't know if he's got 40 pitches in him again after going 25 Sunday, 40 Monday, especially in very, very high stress with up downs and things like that. So I feel that Maytime, like you said, probably not available, but I feel like if things get super, super close and the situation calls for it, I could see him coming in if they really don't trust anyone else. For Reed Garrett, I'm trying to avoid it, but you don't have Budo, so maybe he could be like seventh inning guy or something like that. But I mean, again, it kind of depends on how Maton feels. I feel like if Maton's available, you could do something along the lines of like Static 7, Maton 8, Diaz 9. I mean, that would definitely be a pretty nice combination. So there's a few different ways they can go, but I feel like just also considering the David Pearson element for some matchups maybe is worth it. But overall, I mean, Manaea for this second half of the season has done a good job of working deep into games. So you're hoping that he could do that once again. And that would just make all the decision making a lot easier, knowing they don't need as much of the bullpen and maybe just need those top guys at the end to close it out, and you'll be in really good shape.
Yeah, I definitely think Peterson adds a little bit more to the equation here, not just for this game, but if game 3 is necessary, if you need to use him for multiple innings, you also, with him stretched out as a starter as of right now, you also could piggyback him off the back of Jose Quintana. If that happens, because Jose Quintana, we know we've had these situations where he's going 2 or 3 innings and he's just crapping himself. You could get long relief from him back to back days, kind of just eating those innings and trying to combine that. But that's a situation that we are not currently in as of right now. We don't know if game 3 is necessary. So we'll see what happens. Stanley coming in saying, I'm looking forward to a game 2 victory. We hope so as well. We want this team to get rested. Let's just say that. But, I think, the key to this is just how they kind of want to play it out. Of course, it still has to start with how Manaea is able to get through the game. If he's not able to get through the game, if he's not able to give you the volume you were able to get from Severino to put you in that position, you do have a lot of guys to back you up right now because you have a little bit more of a rested bullpen with the circumstance. So everything kind of fell into place for the Mets last night when it came to somebody like, Luis Severino going 6 innings, even though he wasn't the best. He still kept them in the game. He was able to relax after the offense was able to be a little bit more timely. So, I think, things just need to flow that way for them to kind of piece things together with the bullpen as it usually has to be. I mean, that's pretty much stating the obvious, but, they are in a really good spot as to see, if they actually could, sweep out this Milwaukee team and beat them for the 3rd time in a row, including the regular season, after losing to them 5 times in a row in the regular season, a team that just seemed to best us, which was a little bit concerning to think about when you think of, a Milwaukee team that, doesn't have that many resources. They lost David Stearns. We talked about that team, not being somewhat competitive going into this season. It seemed like it was kind of a throwaway year, kind of looked like where the Mets were in. And it just seemed like they were on a completely different level than us in that opening series. But that's water under the bridge now. The Mets are in a completely different situation. This is even a different team from what they were opening the series 0-3, opening the season 0-5. And hopefully that they can set the tone here. I'm hoping to get 6 from Manaea. That's like my ideal scenario right here. So you kind of can just go to the back end of maybe it's Garrett, Stanek, Diaz, or you can just rest those arms in general because I mean, who knows what happens with somebody like Reed Garrett, because Reed Garrett, sometimes he has it, sometimes he doesn't. We know he's an adrenaline type of pitcher, so this would probably be a good spot for him if he were to succeed. But when it comes to the overall pitching matchup, I mean, I'll talk about Frankie Montas a little bit more in the keys to the game. But as for this lineup, some players to watch in this one, I will bring up some former matchups, but we also can talk about some guys that we have a hunch maybe they will have a good game here, and maybe they will be a catalyst. Francisco Lindor, I would say, is the man to watch right now because he is 4 for 12 with 2 doubles and 4 walks against a guy like Frankie Montas. So not only does Frankie Montas walk a lot of batters, he has walked individual batters many times in his career. Now, when you're talking about overall matchups for the Mets, on their side, you have Bryce Terang, who is 3 for 3 against Manaea with 2 doubles. Bryce Terang had quite a game last night. I was really surprised to see him batting 9th again tonight. I'm not going to lie. I think he was batting 2nd or something yesterday.
I think he led off yesterday.
Did he lead off? Wow.
I think so.
All right. Well, that's weird to think about, but I guess it's lefty-lefty. I guess that's what they're kind of looking at right now. But again, he has a good career against Sean Manaea. I'm not sure when any of those hits were before he made the change with Driveline or after. I don't know.
I mean, it could have been
full on specifics, but
first series. Or did Manaea face Detroit his first start? I don't know if Manaea was in the opening series.
No, he wasn't.
In Citi Field because his first start was against Detroit, so it had to have been well before those changes because it wasn't.
Yeah, probably. Possibly. I don't know. Maybe he did well against him in Milwaukee like a week ago. Possibly. But other guys
actually, that's where it was. He went 3 for 4 on Friday.
Oh, against
there you go.
The Mets.
Oh, yes,
okay.
I guess the Mets overall, yeah.
So there you go. Revenge match, I guess.
And
other guys in this lineup.
So he was on base 4 times that game.
Ooh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, that guy has been a pain in the ass to us. So let's just say that.
And I mean, listen, Rhys Hoskins, he hit the grand slam against Manaea on Friday, so he's definitely a player to watch as always.
Yeah.
Gary Sanchez didn't start yesterday. He obviously faces the lefties, so he's a guy to watch that he's in the lineup now. And just that the Brewers have also just kind of changed that configuration, batting Contreras and Adames back-to-back, which they did not do yesterday. So they're definitely trying out some new things tonight facing the left-hander.
Yeah, I mean, from the Mets lineup, I would say that there's some other guys in here that you can look forward to. Is there anybody that you would point your eye to in this lineup against Frankie Montas this time around?
Yeah, I mean, I do find it interesting that Starling Marte also has good career numbers against Montas, but Marte did not start in the last matchup on Friday. So I do find that pretty fascinating. So we'll kind of get to see how that goes because just overall, the Mets are going with a little bit of a different look than they did on Friday. I mean, on the last game, Jose Iglesias batted 5th, and now tonight he's batting 2nd. Vientos was 2nd, now he's 3rd. Nimmo was 4th. Last time he was 3rd. Alonso was 4th. Again, Winker started. But they had the pretty much same order, except they had switched Alvarez and Taylor. So I find that fascinating. But one of the things I did want to touch upon is the defense kind of letting down Manaea in the last start. Yeah. And one of the guys who was a part of that was Tyrone Taylor. I mean, there was a bit of a soft liner that falls in front of him. He goes for the diving catch, and the ball kind of bounces up in the air, goes over him, and leads to another run scoring from Milwaukee. And with the speed they have, everybody just moving up on the base path. So while Tyrone Taylor has been the much better bat than Harrison Bader, it just overall, Taylor's bat is good, but it's not overwhelmingly great. So I do find the Mets are just going with this full offense approach by starting Taylor and Alvarez. I feel like I would at least consider maybe starting one of Torrens or Bader and then making adjustments as needed. But you know what? It worked yesterday, so they're going to go with it. I'm not going to question Mendoza. All of his decisions have been right for the most part, especially yesterday. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I just think it's something to consider with how the defense was. I feel like with Manaea, you feel pretty good that he should keep the run total low. So as long as you're not giving Milwaukee extra opportunities with your lack of defense, you should be okay to just get those couple of hits from the big guys and not have to rely so much on a very offensive heavy personnel group.
I mean, if you're coming off of just base results, and again, like this is just like a very easy, simple way to look at it. I mean, you're looking at a sub. I mean, you're looking at what 3.13 ERA with Alvarez, 3.28 ERA with Terens for Manaea. He's pitched a lot more innings to Alvarez, 112, and then 24.2 for Luis Terens. I mean,
Yeah,
it seems like this has been a good
if that's what
battery.
he's comfortable
Yeah.
with, then that's what matters the most. But I just think with the overall running game is some. I think Milwaukee's going to be
Yeah,
really
true.
really aggressive tonight with how yesterday went, do or die game. Again, for them to not even try a stolen base yesterday just doesn't seem like them at all. So I feel like they're going to be very aggressive tonight, and I just feel Torrens obviously the better option than Alvarez. Alvarez went hitless yesterday. Even in the game against Montas last week, Alvarez was hitless as well. So he drew a couple of walks, but it's just something to consider. I mean, again, I'm gonna give Mendoza the benefit of the doubt, but I just thought it was something to think about that when you have your ace out there, you shouldn't feel like you need so much offense. But that's just me.
I mean, it's very possible that it happens. I mean, you also can look at it from the angle of Sean Manaea just not pitching well against Milwaukee and them possibly having his number. I mean, I don't know. Sean Manaea struggling in the postseason in his career. However you want to look at it, I mean, maybe it's possible that he does need a lot of offensive help in this game. I mean, it might happen because he's been susceptible to postseason blowups. Again, he's a completely different pitcher, but you can always put it in the back of your mind because he is the same person. You know, they have the same first and last name, and the same beating heart. I guess I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. But I mean, I think that when it comes to the overall defense, you know that they're going to take advantage of any situation that you screw up. And that was one of the main reasons as to why they lost that game with Manaea on the mound last time. And, hopefully they can find a way to bounce back. And I do want to give my keys to the game as to how we can bounce back. I'll go one by one here. With these topics, of course. We touched on this a little bit, but I do want to talk about the first key being the mental mess. That being the fact that Frankie Montas has a lack of put away. He's had it all season and probably before when he was with the Yankees as well. Left-handed hitters have not only destroyed Frankie Montas, but they also have an 806 OPS versus Montas on 2 strike counts. And right-handed hitters it's no better, 724. He is one of the worst pitchers in 2024 from the stretch. With runners in scoring position, hitters are hitting 818 OPS, and he also has the 11th worst left on base percentage, 68.9% among starting pitchers. So, of course, creating traffic, putting the pressure on Montas early. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, is there a way that they can conduct that? I mean, I feel like, stealing on him probably will, because I do know he does take a while to get to the plate as well. Stealing on him will probably have to be something to do that, but he will allow a lot of base runners. So we'll see what happens there. But in terms of just the overall situational, they're playing against somebody who has struggled against that. So hopefully they can take advantage. I don't know. What do you think about that whole situation with the Mets offense against Montas in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, when you consider the very strong numbers for the left-handed hitters, I still find it interesting that Winker's not in the lineup, especially
Yeah.
considering the big hit he got yesterday. He's got crowd heat on him, so I feel like he had a little more adrenaline, a little more motivation, and just kind of would be in the zone just to give the Brewers a little extra anxiety. So JD Martinez, he got a hit as well yesterday, a big hit. So I guess he's just going with the more proven guy, but overall, I would have went Winker, especially considering those numbers that you mentioned. But I feel like if you know that the Brewers are going to be running heavy and Carlos Mendoza, the Mets are treating this like a big game, if they're bringing Pearson out of the pen and everything like that, then you should be aggressive too if the pitching matchup calls for it. So that goes on Lindor. His back is much healthier this time around than it was last time the Mets faced Montas. It was his first game back, and he had the stolen bases against Atlanta. So I wouldn't mind seeing Lindor kind of try to swipe one. Nemo's been very successful this season. I believe it's like 15 for 15 or so. I wouldn't mind seeing him try to swipe one. Taylor, obviously, he gets on, go for it. Marte, this is what you're here for. Go for it, So I feel like those are the kind of things that you put that even extra pressure on Montas and hopefully leads to more mistakes. And then your big hitters capitalize, your Alvarez's, your Alonso's, your Vientos, those guys, they just have a much better situations. They'll have runners in scoring position. Those singles become runs. So I would like to see the Mets kind of show that sense of urgency as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to gather the numbers here for starting pitchers, with just overall holding the running game. I'm just trying to find it out here, but we'll see as to what we do. But again, I mean, Jeff Kaplan agreeing with you regarding not surprised if Winker comes in a situational moment. It might happen, probably just to put more pressure on Montas, but to be honest, the issue, what left-handed hitters are doing against him, I still do. I do agree with you in that sense because it was kind of weird, especially with how much emphasis it's been put on Montas struggling against lefties. So I mean, it's weird to be honest, but I don't know. Maybe JD Martinez comes through. He's Mr. I found something, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would consider is that, obviously we saw the Mets beat up on Ashby yesterday. So let's say Winker comes into the ball game. I mean, the other lefty that Milwaukee has is DL Hall. So if you start JD Martinez, but then you go to Winker at some point, which I don't even know who you would bat him for, maybe Taylor at some point, and then they go DL. Well, I mean, I guess if that's the case, you could bat Winker for Taylor, and then just put Bader in, and then Winker never has to face the lefty DL Hall later in the game or something like that. Because if you were going to bring Winker in this game, who are you pinch hitting him for? I feel like Taylor's the only guy that really stands out. I don't think they would pinch hit JD Martinez, because if that was the case, then JD Martinez shouldn't have started in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't think he really has any real, he doesn't really have, any, okay. He doesn't really have any success against Montas at all.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird to look at it. This season, Frankie Montas has given up the 13th most stolen bases against 17.
Wow.
Actually, right next to Freddie Peralta, 17. As well.
And the Mets were not aggressive against Freddie last night. And you know what? William Contreras plays a part of that. You have to consider Frankie Montas was with the Reds in the first half of the season. So
yeah,
it wasn't exactly the same battery that was behind the plate. So that's another part of it too.
We'll see. Again, I think that anybody that's as slow to the plate as Frankie Montas is, they're definitely going to put some pressure on him. But even though throughout his career, he's definitely had some trouble with the stolen base, not like Noah Syndergaard bad, but I don't think anybody was ever Noah Syndergaard bad, but that's a different discussion. But another key to the game that I do want to put in here has to do with Montas as well, being second impressions. If the Mets come off cold for the first time through the order, I wouldn't panic just yet. It would be nice to see them get some competitive AVs through the first time through the order, but when it comes to Montas, he has a earned run average over 6, and hitters are slashing 278, 347, 497 with 37 extra base hits versus him second time and third time around the order. So it's been tough for him to make adjustments to other hitters, maybe go to the secondary stuff the next time around. So, that definitely sounds like, to me, a pitcher with a lot of command issues. So hopefully they can attack second time around the order. Maybe they put pressure on him early. But again, we'll see how long the leash is going to be for Montas in a win-or-go-home game for the Brewers.
And I find that very interesting because yesterday, eventually, Freddie Peralta got in the zone. He retired 9 in a row, but then they pull him, and Pat Murphy says, I didn't want Peralta to face the order a third time around. And he went to his bullpen. And the Brewers used quite a good amount of their bullpen, used a couple of their big guys, but they're still going to have them work on the back to back nights. And I think for sure, you're seeing Trevor McGill tonight. I feel like
Oh,
that's kind
absolutely.
of no doubt. And if things get close and late, you're seeing the airbender Devin Williams as well. So I feel like Pat Murphy is one of these managers that he told you right off the bat, he's someone who believes in this third time around the order, fourth time around the order kind of thing. So I feel like you were saying, kind of drawing up that pitch count as well, knowing that Montas can have his control issues and things like that. That's another thing to really keep in mind. So if they could pull him early, have these guys work a second 9 in a row, and it just kind of makes life a little more tougher for them.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, it's just more of kind of the mental makeup of him. He's just been someone who's melted down in these situations. Now, I could still bring up like some Mets pitchers in the past who melt down like that, but we don't have the time. But when it comes to somebody like Frankie Montas, someone who's been hurt a lot, who's definitely pitched with a chip on his shoulder, let's just say for a while in his career, they got to get to him. And the only way to get to him is to have him pitching from the stretch. Like I said, 11th lowest left on base percentage. So he has been he has not been good from the stretch. He's always struggled from the stretch, which is the main reason as to why, there's always been talk about him being, an actual reliever, but he does have the stuff as to where he can get those swings and misses. So we'll see what happens. Maybe there is some adrenaline that allows him to get in a groove. I hope not. But again, second time, third time through the order, maybe there is a short leash for somebody like Frankie Montas. Maybe he only faces like 15 batters throughout this entire game. But we also did make quite a dent into their bullpen last night. So we'll see how they play that. But hopefully the Mets can attack that way because, we all know that the Brewers can find a way to make some offense and just completely pull it out of their ass by basically just
And I think
stealing
you're seeing
bases,
the bunting tonight too, for sure as
bunting,
well.
infield
Yeah.
hits. They have the most of all in
Mm-hmm.
baseball. It's all about very little margin for error. Even though the Mets do have the advantage, if the ball doesn't roll your way, you could be in trouble. It just happens, and you got to be aware of that. I am hoping that the Mets, in terms of defense, is a little bit more detail oriented, but I'm hoping that the corners do stay in against some of these bunt threats, especially with Vientos. We know that Vientos at third base, he's been serviceable fielding these ground balls, but we know that he did have that blunder to start the game
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. But overall, then he just made up for it with his bat. But we're gonna hope that the Mets defense is up to the task. And again, we'll see what happens. I think that they're gonna try and utilize everyone that they possibly can defensively. And speaking of defensively, I do want to talk about my third key to the game, that being the revenge accomplice. This has to be going with Sean Manaea. Now, Sean Manaea, last time out, had a really tough outing. Most of it was his fault. Some of it wasn't. But the Mets have done a phenomenal job this season of playing for each other, picking up teammates, basically making up for things, and basically just going in the flow of the game. With the momentum of game one and all that adrenaline, playing a little bit more loose with a 1-0 advantage in the series, help Sean Manaea get his revenge. He had a horrendously umpired game and an early blow up last time in Milwaukee. 3 2/3 innings pitched, 7 hits, 5 earned runs, 2 walks, 1 strikeout. But the defense also did not help him later, committing multiple defensive miscues that almost led to the Rhys Hoskins back-breaking grand slam, and also just not being able to go deep into the game. And hopefully, even though he is a big swing and miss guy when he is right, but you got to back up your pitcher as the nerves will settle. The Mets are in a good position right now. We also know that Sean Manaea has had some, bugaboos in the postseason. Hopefully, as a new pitcher, we hopefully can get over it. But another thing that he can get revenge on, like I said, 13 earned runs in like 7 innings of postseason baseball for Sean Manaea. So hopefully he can flip the script. Christopher coming in saying that he's late, and listen, you can always replay it before the stream is over. We will have about 10 more minutes live here going, and then we'll let everybody breathe before the playoff game, and then of course our post game, which we will have about 15-20 minutes afterwards. For those of you wondering where our third Mike Andrew is, most likely he will be here for the post game in game 2. If he's not, we will embarrass him publicly, and he will get the formal punishment in front of everybody. This will not be dealt privately. We will just be shaming him, and we'll see what happens. Jay Beer's coming in as well, saying that he's praying that the Mets win tonight. Boy, I hope so too. I mean, I think that not only we want this team to win every game possible, but also the fact that you do have a factor of rest that you want to give this team somewhat, because they've definitely been playing a lot, battling a lot of adversity. One of two teams that are both in the playoffs, playing like 3 days in a row, going straight from the regular season to the postseason, no
More
days
than
off
that,
whatsoever.
they've been playing since Friday.
Yeah, Atlanta's been playing a lot. I was seeing a lot of excuses from Braves fans last night when they lost and got shut out in San Diego, of how the Braves have played like 3 games in the last 24 hours. So have the Mets. So I'm sorry. Boo fricking who? But, we'll see what happens. But when it comes to some of the injury news, I do want to bring up before we head out of here, Kodai Senga, who somebody asked about Kodai Senga, him coming back at one point. Kodai Senga did throw a 25-pitch live BP on Monday, and there is no word on his availability for future playoff rounds. If he does come back, it most likely will be in relief, considering the timeline right now. But also, Jeff McNeil, it looks like he will be ramping up soon after an improved X-ray on his wrist. Is it wrist? It's wrist, right?
Yeah.
Broken wrist, something like that.
There's your lefty bat.
He could be your lefty bat. But also other injury news that we got today. The Mets have pretty much ruled out Paul Blackburn after the continuing issues with his spinal fluid leak injury in his back. That just
sounds rough.
It just sounds rough. They said it's not as extreme, but most likely we will see.
Don't lose your fluids.
We will see. We will see probably him back in spring training 2025, because he does have a year of control. Most likely we'll back up that rotation next year we have 3 pending free agents in our rotation. So he probably still will be here next year. And hopefully be healthy, because he has definitely had a injury-riddled season. But as for right now, Christopher saying on a scale from Ottavino to 10, which is a really good way to put it. As we all know, we're big fans of Ottavino here. How confident are you? Frank, you want to take this one from 0 to 10? How do you feel going into game 2?
Yeah, my YouTube account says that it's at a 7 right now. I feel pretty good. I think one of the other big keys is not having Ramon de Jesus behind the plate this time around. It was a factor last game. Getting a little squeezed in the first inning with those walks that led to the Rhys Hoskins grand slam. But then when the Mets had their opportunity to maybe make a run at it, you had Francisco Alvarez get called out on ball 5 of the at-bat. So, that definitely was frustrating. And then the other part of it is when Alvarez got thrown out, Alvarez got called out on strikes. He didn't get thrown out of the game. Mendoza gets thrown out of the game. So then you have, the bench coach Gibbons. He's now the acting manager, and he goes to Bader with the bases loaded as a pinch hitter instead of Marte, instead of Acuna. So I feel like with Mendoza, so listen, you could have had bases loaded multiple times, and you could have had maybe a different hitter the second time around. And Bader hit the ball to the wall. True, made a great play. But I feel like there is a scenario where that game could have gone differently for sure, or at least been a lot tighter. Because when you're looking at it from like a casual standpoint, as far as like, okay, this matchup just happened less than a week ago, and when it did, the Brewers won 8-4. And I don't think it's as simple as that, because I feel like there were multiple factors that went into that final result that are not the case today. One of those being the home plate umpire. But the other part was that it was Francisco Lindor's first game back from his week or so off with the back injury he was having. And very early on in the game, Lindor makes a very unconventional error, a throwing error, where he was kind of on the run and just kind of threw it. And you're wondering if maybe trying to compensate for his back. And then I'm pretty sure DH the next game or whatever. But he's in a much healthier spot right now, to where I feel like that kind of error is not going to happen. So I feel like there are some things to be encouraged by. Lindor is swinging the bat much better now than he was last week health-wise. He was very just kind of conservative with his approach. He was taking a lot of pitches more so than usual, not being like that aggressive bat at the top of the order, that big-time power bat. So I feel like also with the Brewers, they were getting a lot of choppers that were kind of falling over infielders' heads. There was another play, line drive, that goes right off Lindor's glove. He didn't jump as high as we've probably seen him jump in the past. So I feel like there are some hits that kind of bounce the Brewers' way on Friday, and maybe that goes a little differently as well. But, just the other thing, like we said, you have some different personnel, Marte making the start today, but also Danny Young came into that game. He's throwing wild pitches, bouncing in the dirt, off Alvarez's shin guard, so he was awful. Alex Young comes in later, gives up a home run to Gary Sanchez. So it's like there are some things that we saw last week that we are not going to see tonight that I feel like just will overall make for a much more tight game.
As for the umpiring crew, you don't have Ramon DeJesus out here. You do have Vic Carapazza, who I hope is not behind the plate. He was the umpire that tossed Edwin Diaz out at Wrigley Field earlier this year. So hopefully, if Diaz comes in and they say that his hands are too sticky, then we're going to have some issues. But other than that, you had Alex Tosi behind the plate, who actually called a pretty good game. It was like two borderline calls, one that was probably pretty much missed, but that was pretty much it. The umpiring crew didn't really do that bad of a job, I wouldn't say. Not just because I'm not saying that because the Mets won. Not saying that just because the Mets won, but I think it's easy to say that there was no really big impressions that we made. Mike Estabrook is also on this crew. I think I've heard that name before. I don't know if he's good or not.
Yeah, there's quite a few common well-known umpires in this group, so I wasn't too alarmed when I saw it.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, you have the two extra umpires on the left and right field line for the postseason. But we'll see what factors in. You have no Ramon DeJesus. We all know that Ramon DeJesus had that rough game against the Brewers, for those of you just tuning in.
Yeah, he missed 3 calls yesterday total. That's crazy.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, they put the best of the best there, and if you screw up a postseason game, they're going to kick you out. So, we all know what happened with Whistlegate for the Raiders Bengals the other few years ago. But, I think that when it comes to the umpires, sometimes you have rough games, sometimes you don't. But, I think that there's some factors in this game that will, bend your way, and sometimes they won't. So hopefully, we have a better umpiring crew in this game. And, there isn't, guys trying to instigate the way that Ramon DeJesus did. But other things that I do want to bring up, first of all, congratulations to the Tigers. I mean, what a story this has been this year. They were at 0.2% on Fangraphs projection system at one point in the middle of August to make the postseason. They made on an incredible run, just beat the Astros for 2 games, knocking out an Astros team that has a lot of key free agents coming from it. So maybe that could be the end of the Astros dynasty. Who knows? Probably not, because they still have tons of talent. They've had tons of injuries this year. But, we'll see what happens. Updates from Kansas City and Baltimore is the bottom 7. KC is up 2-1. And, we'll see what happens. As for, Daniel Cap's coming in saying no
The
messing
Daniels
around.
always show up together. What the?
I don't know. Listen,
I feel like it's a burner account. There's got to be a burner.
Daniel Cap's coming in saying, no messing around tonight. Don't give him any momentum back. That would be awesome. And again, those little minor mistakes that probably are some really costly mistakes against the Brewers team like this. And there's some other stuff that I did want to go over, but I, for some reason, cannot remember it, which is really tough when you're trying to say things that you're trying to remember and then you don't remember. So that's a rough thing to happen. Let's see if I can jog my memory at all. But for those of you in here, if you have any remaining questions, we will stay on for about a minute or two. And then, we'll pop up some comments here of the conversation going. Strike Blitz saying Iglesias is the team's catalyst. Absolutely. He's always in the middle of everything. Daniel saying with a stat here saying that no team who was down 0-1 has won the 3-game series, and only the Mets were to force Game 3. And that was all thanks to Jacob deGrom. And the Brewers have good pitching, but they don't have Jacob deGrom. So, we'll see. But again, this 3-game series thing, it's only been around for 3 years. I think this has only been 3 years. But
and Frankie Montas is always an interesting guy because, to go back to 2022 with Chris Bassett, we talked about the 3 pitchers that were available from Oakland. We said it was Bassett, Manaea, and Montas. So in this case, you're seeing that Oakland connection with Manaea versus Montas. And it looks like we ended up with the right guy all in all.
Yeah. Sean Manaea has had quite a season. Let's just say that no matter where he goes, he is going to get paid. And if he does have a great postseason outing as compared to the 3 that he's had in his career, he's definitely going to be on the radar as one of the top free agents. He's definitely going to finish top 10 in the Cy Young Award winning this year. He's had quite a year, and hopefully he can come through for us with the Mets at a 1-0 advantage over the Brewers in Milwaukee. Hopefully they can full on finish off this revenge tour. Hopefully there's no more Rhys Hoskins drama, but we don't have Jeff McNeil to cry about anything. So, that's it. But other than that, I think we're going to finish it off here. Of course, we have about 20-ish minutes to game time for those of you who are counting. For those of you watching live right now, thank you for those of you who tuned in. For those of you who want even more content, don't worry. We will be back after the game to recap it for our podcast episode number 89 coming up for the postseason, and we will be doing it all postseason long before every single postseason game, and as well as also our Twitter and TikTok. Follow us there. Listening platforms, of course, our audio for the post game will be out at 9 a.m. You can go ahead before the game today and see our post-game thoughts of Game 1 as well if you want to see that. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Turn on post notifications. For those of you who are watching on Twitter, you can also you can go to our YouTube channel, which is the best way to chat with us because some of the comments just don't come in.
Get your questions in, get your comments in, get everything in.
Yeah.
So YouTube is the spot to be.
Yep, definitely. YouTube, and of course, follow.
And Twitter ain't paying us either, so get to YouTube.
Yeah. But I think that's it. Pretty much. I think we can wrap it up here. Make sure to follow everybody individually, including our third Mike, who will most likely be here for the post game, which is Andrew, the Rhino, whatever you want to call him. All of the links are in the description. And somebody did ask us if we're going to be doing watch parties. Probably not. that's just really a tough thing to configure, even more tough than post and pre-games. It all depends, maybe during the World Series if they make it, possibly, but it's something that we try to avoid just because of how things sync up, and it's just really rough to do.
Yeah.
So
we'll end up
that,
is that like one of our TVs like a minute ahead. So like I'm reacting and then like no one else is reacting. So it kind of gets all over the place to really be in sync.
It's rough. Usually when you do watch along streams, you need to all be in the same room at the same time.
Yeah.
It's just
Which
better.
I don't know if that will ever happen.
It probably won't ever happen. Who knows?
Geographically, it's tough for us.
I think that we'll just close this one off with the poll, which is what I was trying to bring up. Poll asking of who will win Game 2. 76% of you are saying the Mets. You guys are confident in the Game 1 win. 11% of you are saying the Brewers, and 14% of you are pleading the fifth. Do not want to jinx anything because, again, superstitions are there in baseball. I'm not one who really believes in them. I'm the one who just believes that the computer never lies. Frank more believes in satanic rituals. And Andrew just believes in food. Anyways, we will... We're going to stop it off here. Once again, back here for the post game about 15 to 20 minutes after the game for our podcast. But other than that, enjoy the game, everyone. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you guys later tonight.